Hey there, Oscar here. I work for Charlie Morgan and his partner Bo at EasyGrow and Imperium Acquisition, and I just got finished rewatching a client interview I had the other day with one of our clients. His name is Chris. We managed to scale Chris from literally zero to $19,000 a month in 11 months of working with us. He's basically at 20. Now, in the interview, we talk about 10, 15K a month, but we did manage to get him all the way up to 19K. He actually ended the month at 19K, which is freaking exciting because he's so awesome. He's worked really hard. He really deserves it. It's a very awesome interview, so stick to the end and let's hop into it. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to my first client interview for Charlie Morgan and his partner, Bo. I am sitting here with Chris, who I had my initial call with almost a year ago now. Do you remember the specific date?
17th of
I don't remember.
December.
17th of December. So in 2 weeks, it's a year ago. Chris, he has managed to go from a complete, maybe not beginner, but at least revenue-wise, from complete ground zero. And this month, you've done 10K so far, which is impressive. And you're looking to end out the month at 15, which is very solid. For full transparency, we'll get into whether all of that is consistent or not later on in the interview. But either way, it is very impressive. I've seen you put in a lot of hard work. So I'll put the what should I call it? I'll pass the ball over to you, Chris. Could you just quick to introduce yourself, where you're from, what niche you're in, how old you are, how long you've been working with us specifically, just all that good stuff.
Yeah, no problem, Oscar. So, yes, I'm Chris. I'm from Singapore, actually, and I'm 23. And yeah, so I started with Imperium December, right? December last year. I started out in the gym niche. I actually recently made a very calculated and intentional change of niche, and that has served me well in my specific situation. So yeah, I was in the gym niche. Now I'm actually in the real estate niche, and yeah, so I started out before before joining Imperium. I started out, yeah, like Oscar said, as a complete beginner, at least in the realm of SMMA, and obviously with the help of Imperium, I've gotten to where I am now. So it's been a long and extraordinary journey and a very enjoyable one. So yeah.
Okay. And could you let's get into the first thing. So you mentioned that it's been a long journey. Could you just elaborate, like, where were you before you started working with it? Had you taken other programs? How long have you been in the agency space? What was the situation looking like for you?
Yeah, perfect. So I had just sort of gotten into SMMA maybe like this time last year. So November, I had watched, a couple of Charlie videos or quite a few of them, and a couple of like Thomas Garnett videos and stuff like that, which I think is a pretty typical entrance to the SMMA space. And yeah, I started out as a student. I was actually a student in NUS, which is the National University of Singapore. I was studying computer science or computer engineering, and yeah, I just realized I was deeply unfulfilled with the life path that I was on at that time, and I realized that part of the journey that I needed to take was starting my own business, right? And so that's how I got into SMMA as a entrance business, right, to start with. Um, and I was extremely compelled by Charlie's videos. I thought that he was a very sharp fellow. So I thought, okay, like if I'm going to enter this space, I can either pay my ignorance debt with time or with money, right? So I thought, okay, I can spend a year or two trying to figure this out on my own, or I can look at who the top people are in the space and what they're offering and pay, obviously with money instead of with time. And I would much rather take that option because, obviously all the most successful people in the world, they all value their time more than their money, right? So I thought, okay, if I want to be like that, I've got to pay down this ignorance debt somehow. And so that's when I made the decision to, hopefully enroll in Imperium's program. In fact, before I even got on the call with Oscar, I was already decided. I had already sold myself. I was like, yeah, I'm doing this, So that's where I started, and with zero, any kind of business experience. I hadn't taken any programs or anything before, and yeah, so that's sort of the full picture of where I started. And I was at a point in my life where I had created a lot of urgency for myself, So I was at that point where I thought, okay, like I really need to take action and it's time to stop faffing about. And yeah, Imperium really, really helped with that.
Okay. And by the way, apologies everyone for the Wi-Fi, but I just found out Chris, he is in Bali, so he has some crappy with the Wi-Fi. But we can still hear most of what you're saying, so it's fine. But apologies for that. But okay. On that note, Chris, because I actually find this with a lot of people, I've had a lot of calls now with people, and one of the common things that I hear from people is they're currently, obviously a large majority of the people we work with, or at least a large demographic, or people who are in education, whether that's college or whether that's university or something like that. And one of the main things that they always say is they didn't feel like they fit in. They know deep down it wasn't really for them. Feel like they're sort of the outsider. Did you have those same feelings when you were there?
Yeah, I was looking at sort of the quality of the education that I was getting and the quality of growth that I was having as a person in university. And it it obviously it didn't match up to how I wanted to be growing as a person. And I looked at the fact that I want to have an exceptional life and I want to make an exceptional impact on this world, right? And if I want to do that, I need to perform exceptional actions. What I noticed is that I wanted an exceptional life and I was doing very mediocre actions, which is delusion, right? So as soon as I realized the absurdity of how I was living and how mediocre a life I was setting myself up to have by continuing on this path, that's when it became clear to me that I needed to take action that was different from all the people around me if I want to have a different life from them, right? So that's kind of how it played out, and I eventually ended up leaving university in my 3rd year out of 4, to the dismay of many, and to the shock and
What did your parents say?
Oh, that's still a that is still a can of worms between me and my parents. Like I've had collectively, I would say more than 10 to 15 hours of conversation with them, like real sitting down and trying to hash things out in conversation with them. Obviously they were unhappy with it, but that's because they grew up in a world in which a degree was a necessary step towards having a successful life. And obviously the delineation that I made was, okay, look, this is I still believe that a degree is a necessary step towards a certain form of employment. That's just not a form of employment that I'm particularly interested in or that I want to pursue, right? And so the degree doesn't have the same value to me that it does to them. And so that's an extremely difficult message to communicate to my parents who are, in their 50s, right? So they were not happy with it, and they still aren't, right? But that's just the conversation that I had to have with them, and that I'm sure many people watching this video are thinking. And there's a lot of resistance probably building up in your head when you think of having that conversation with your parents, right? Just understand that they love you and they want the best for you. And in communicating with them, you have to say like, look, I'm not expecting you to support this decision. I'm not expecting you to say, yes, go, Chris, just drop out and go, and because they're not going to do that. There are very few parents who are going to say something like that to you, right? So just understand that that's the reality, and that you can say to them very candidly, just say, look, I'm not expecting you to support this decision. I'm not expecting you to fully understand what I'm trying to do here. I just hope that in time you can see with my actions, I will prove to you that this is actually the right step for me. And it's difficult for us to determine that now. And it's difficult for us to sit here and say like, oh yes, this is the best thing, because it hasn't played out yet. But I will show you, mom and dad, thank you for loving me and wanting to take care of me. I will show you that this is the right step for me. Right. So, I mean, that's kind of how the conversation went.
Okay, and you said that you're expecting to close this month out at 15K. You've done 10. If you do this, I don't know whether this is the first month. Is this the first month that you're sort of hitting those numbers?
Yeah, it's been quite steady actually up until this point. Sort of climbing, and then there's been peaks and troughs, obviously, because I used to be working on performance offers as well. So when the performance varies month to month. So I think last month I was sitting between 6 to 8. For the last 2 months, I've been sitting between 6 to 8K, and then this month broke 10. But the growth this month has been quite tremendous, and so yeah, I'm expecting to close out at about 15 plus this month.
Okay. Do you think if you knew back in December last year that in November next year you'll have made 10K, you looking to end the month at 15, you're in Bali, would you think you'd be happy with that if you knew where you are right now back then?
I'd certainly be happy with it, but I would also be looking at it from the frame of, okay, what else? Like, what else have you done? How else have you grown? You know, how, like, are you the same person just with some money sprinkled on top? Because that's not desirable to me. I didn't particularly like who I was a year ago compared to who I am now, right? So I'd also be paying attention to, like, okay, how have other areas of your life changed? You know, what have you learned? Like, how have you grown? So I would definitely be happy with it, but I'd also think, in a weird way, I would have thought to myself that it's a given. Like, that's kind of how I looked at it back then, and how I still look at what I want to achieve in my life. Like, it's there, it's a given. It's there for you to, like, as long as you create that life and you're intentional with that, it is there for you. It's there for the taking. Right. So I kind of look at it as, oh, yeah, okay, makes sense that I'm there. Makes sense that I'm there. You know, why wouldn't I be there? Like, that's how I kind of looked at achieving these, like, financial milestones or whatever, because it's like, I have to. I knew that I had to. And I think that's the thing, that when you're just starting out, like, creating a sense of urgency in your head is crucial. Like, Robert Greene talks about this in 33 Strategies of War, like, creating this artificial sense of urgency in your head where it's not that, oh, I want to succeed. I want to do well with the agency. It's like, no, like, you have to. There is no other option here. So yeah, part of me would be happy, but part of me would also say, yeah, makes sense. It's a given. It had to happen. If it didn't happen, I'd be on the street somewhere. So, like, it had to happen, you know? So yeah.
Okay, fair play. What do you mean by that last thing? Would you have been kicked out if you dropped out and you couldn't provide?
No, certainly I wouldn't have been kicked out, because my family is very loving. But I guess in my head, I'd set it up such that if it came to that, I would be prepared to do. If it genuinely came to me living on the street to try and make it work, I knew that I would do that. And that's a level of certainty that I think can really serve you, right? Like, just burning the boats in your head, even if it's artificial, like, even if you're just engineering that sensation in your brain, still, it's crucial. Like, I mean, for me, I genuinely did burn the boats. I left my degree, I left that entire thing behind. So I gave myself no option than to succeed. And I think that that's a nice, it's a good frame of mind to have, and I think it definitely served me. So I knew that if it came to that, I would do it. Yeah.
Okay, but let's get to the nuts and bolts of this right here. What I'd like to actually dive into is sort of the program and how you attack the program as soon as you're inside the program. So what was sort of the videos you went through? What was sort of the way that you tackled it? And what would you maybe have done differently now compared to when you actually started out in tackling the program itself?
Okay, yeah, that's a really important question. So when I joined Imperium, it was the old program. So there was a foundations module before there was acquisition genesis. Right now, acquisition genesis sort of serves as the foundation module, I think. So what I did is I tore through the foundations module as fast as possible, retaining obviously as much information as I could. And then I went to self-transcendence. Yeah. And I watched self-transcendence in parallel with me building my outbound systems. So I built out the loom system, like Terminator looms. And in parallel with that, I watched self-transcendence. And that was absolutely crucial. Like, I think everyone who goes through self-transcendence will say this, but it is not a module to skip and put for later. Especially in the case, like you said, Oscar, for the people that maybe
haven't done the digging in their head and don't have strong enough reasons or like compelling enough reasons to take the actions that they need to take, or the beliefs in themselves to do it. Right? For those people, especially, if you can be honest with yourself and feel like you're that person, go through self-transcendence ideally before anything. But in practice, if you genuinely need to make money quickly, then watch it in parallel with building your outbound systems. That was absolutely crucial. Now, what I would do differently. So I watched self-transcendence, and then I watched the sales modules as well, which I think I don't know if anybody is skipping it, but but do not skip the sales modules as well, because they're so crucial to having the actual sales ability to close on the sales calls, right? It doesn't matter if you're booking 30 appointments a week with cold calling if you can't close any of those as actual sales. So like that's really crucial as well. But what I would do differently looking back is that I would revisit self-transcendence more often than I did. And I would revisit the sales systems more often than I did, because like Charlie always said, we need to be reminded more than we need to be taught. And I genuinely think that that's the case. I noticed a few months into running the agency, the start, I had a nice boom. I signed my first client within a month of joining the program. My first 2 sales calls were both closes. So I felt on top of the world. And that's because part of it I would attribute to the fact that my mindset was the strongest at that time. And I just watched the sales modules and I was a killer on the closes. And then just as the months went on and I got deep into the weeds of running the actual agency, those mindset things just started to get fogged up, right? And I wasn't as sharp on sales calls. I realized I was deviating from the line of questioning, right? And I wasn't digging my heels in when it was really time to objection handle. And then when I revisited the sales modules and I revisited self-transcendence, I had the biggest face palm of my life, because I thought, man, like no wonder I'm not closing, and no wonder I'm not as sharp. Like I'm straying, like it's process drift, right? Like I'm straying from the actual processes of the sales calls, and my mindset has taken a bit of a hit because I've been surrounded by, unfortunately, like I've been in an environment where the people around me aren't doing the things that I'm trying to do, and they're not trying to live that life. And so all of those old beliefs, old paradigms, old patterns of behavior started to reappear. And so once I revisited self-transcendence, I had a huge okay, makes sense. Time to get back on track. All right, so I would revisit that once a month, genuinely, at least once a month. I would revisit self-transcendence. I think I would be way further along than I am now if I'd done that.
I like that one. So if we digress, Chris, at this point in time, what's sort of next for you? You're doing 10, 15K per month. By speaking with you, I can tell you're definitely not content, which is how it should be. You're obviously continuously transcending. What's sort of next for you?
So I think what's next for me at this sort of point is to keep building out my team. So currently in my agency, I run a team of 6. It's a pretty tight ship. It's mainly like I have outbound setters and I have a closer on board as well, like a sales rep. So I will be continuing to build out my team on the fulfillment side of things as well, just to allow myself to be working on the higher order things in the agency, and just managing things eventually, from a more top-down perspective. I'm someone that I really love to lead. I really love working with people and leading them and encouraging them. And so that's what I'm going to be doing with the agency specifically. And then I know that focusing on one thing at a time is is a virtue of business, but I will be sort of starting, or I already have actually started creating some content, particularly in the space of, I would say, personal development, self-improvement, that sort of thing, because that is the sort of deeper layer of my purpose. And that's why I wanted the financial freedom to begin with, right? It's because I want to be creating an impact in the world in this way. But I was very clear with myself, and I know this, that I could have the mansion, I could have the Lambo, I could have the Rolex, but if I have all of those things and I'm not making the impact that I want to have on this world, I would genuinely not be deeply spiritually fulfilled, right? So because I know that about myself, I know that I could scale the agency to 7 figures, like great, but I still wouldn't be having the impact that I want to have. And so I would be, in a deep sense, unsatisfied with that. So I am starting to do that on the side, and I will be continuing to build that while, in a sense, automating the agency a little bit more in terms of how many hours I'm putting into it per week. And that's pretty much what's next for me.
Okay, interesting. So Chris, we've been on for quite some time. It's been quite a long one. So this is sort of where I'm going to use Charlie's line and get you to sell the program for me. So if you were 11 months ago, you knew what you knew now, what would you tell yourself? Would you still do the thing? Would you do it on your own? You just go to these specific resources online? What would you tell yourself if you were on that call 11 months ago?
I would say, you know what you have to do. If you're honest with yourself, you know what you have to do. And there is no avoiding doing the work. This program is not going to be a silver bullet. This program is not going to, it's not going to change the things about yourself that you know fundamentally, right? So it will help you to bring out what you really want. It can only help you to bring that out. But if you're not clear on that yourself, then there's no point, right? So get clear. And for myself at that point, when I was honest with myself, I knew that this is what I needed to do. So I would say, you know what you need to do. This will help you, right? And don't go thinking with the hubris that you don't need help. Yeah, don't fall into that trap of individualism and of the whole lone wolf idea, right? Don't fall into that. Like you have ignorance debt, you have to pay it somehow, right? So no doubt I would sell myself 12 months ago the program really, really well, and I would not let myself off the hook in terms of joining. So that's what I'd say.
Fair play. Yeah, ignorance debt, that is a fun one.
It is.
But with that being said, Chris, I think we can wrap it up there. My first interview, I think it went fine. Good stuff, by the way. Like, it's no easy feat. Like, you have to realize it's not easy scaling an agency, and what you've done so far isn't easy. It's something that most people wouldn't be able to do. Hence why most people are not making the money you're making. But I know you can do more after having spoken with you as well. You're capable of a lot more. But yeah, where can people find you?
Thanks very much, Oscar. So people can find me on Instagram at Chris J Langton, and on YouTube as Chris Langton, and yeah, hopefully you'll be seeing more of me in other capacities.
Cool. Any ending questions? Anything you would like to add, or can we wrap it up there?
I think we can wrap it up. Just whoever's watching this, like, I believe in you. And I know that any representative of EasyGrow that you speak to will manifest that same belief in you. You have to first have that in yourself as well, right? So, like, figure it out, do the digging, figure out your reasons for doing things, believe that you can actually achieve it, because other people will, right? And so why not you? So I think that's how I'd like to end it.
I like that. Let's call it there, Chris. Let's call it there.
All right.
Good stuff.
Thank you so much.
Thank you as well.